We're live. As I distracted the authors from a football discussion before we went live about village crime. Let's start off with an introduction to each of you and your books. So if we start with Paul at the top.
Yeah, hello. As I've just been saying to my fellow authors, I'm here in Somerset in the rain today, but I'm not from Somerset, I'm from Yorkshire, and my detective is a Yorkshireman who moves to Somerset because, you know, they always say, write what you know, don't they? And the first book I did was called A Killing Tree, and it came about because I live in a village near this tree, not very far from this tree, which is a real tree. And in my walking group one day, we walked up here, and I thought, what if a body was leaning up against that tree, that very tree? And that's where the whole series came from. That's the very first book. And I think I'm writing book 5 and outlining 6 and 7 at the moment. So it's getting there. And that's all I've got to say, really. Well, I'm sure we'll pick me up later on, and over to the rest of you.
Chris, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I absolutely love that introduction because
you're frozen up.
No, just can always imagine a body somewhere, can't they? That's great. I love that image of a beautiful tree. My name is Chris Mcdonald, and I've done a few of these now, and it's always such a lovely thing to be part of. I am the author of the D.I. Erica Piper series, which is more gritty, police procedural, I guess you'd call it. And then I tried my hand at the Stonebridge series, which is they're a set of about 100 pages each, quite quick, cozy. I don't have the individual ones, but my publisher's done a lovely omnibus of all 6 in one volume, which I'm very pleased with. So yes, I am the author of the Stonebridge series.
Lovely. Jan?
Hi, Jan Edwards. I'm the author of the Bunch Courtney investigations, which is these 3. The first one actually won the Arnold Bennett Book Prize, so that was encouraging. It's set in Sussex, which is my home territory, although I live in Stoke now, so for my sins. What can I say? It's World War II, so it's historical. It's kind of golden age, sleuth type fiction, village fiction, because it's set very much in the village. So, yeah, that's it.
Puts it across quite succinctly. Let's start off with an introduction to like the village you've set it in. Is it a real place? Is it imaginary? Why did you choose to set it there? Let's get going with that kind of description. Do you want to start us off again, Paul? Because
Sure, yeah, thank you. Well, it's a fictional place. It's a small town, really. There are real and fictional villages around it, but the small town I've picked up is called Parminster, which is an amalgamation of sort of 3 towns in the area. One called Ilminster, Crewkerne, another, and Chard. And it's called Parminster because the river nearby is called the Parrot, so Par for parrot, and Minster for blah, blah, blah. And the nice thing about that is I don't have to be totally geographically accurate all the time. I can invent things while still drawing on real streets and calling them something else. So it's really handy from that point of view. I think it's a sort of creative background that sort of gives me a springboard for inventing things without being found out.
Hi, Chris?
Yeah, Stonebridge. So I started writing them during the first lockdown. Well, this was my way of very much of getting home fictionally. So it's based on my hometown of Coleraine, which is on the very north coast of Northern Ireland. It's a lovely place, and I was missing it. So I was just going to call and it would all be set there. I spoke to another author that said, if you say the librarian is a murderer, it can affect how people think about librarians in Coleraine. So it is, when I imagine it, when I write it, it is the streets and the buildings and stuff like that, but rebranded to Stonebridge. But yeah, I very much imagine the town layout as it is.
Nice, Jan.
Well, mine is set in Sussex. It's kind of based in the little village that I was brought up in, which is Rudgwick, which is on the north side of the county. But I've set it near Storrington, which is quite near to the coast, fictional, because as Paul says, it's easier to have a fictional village, then you don't run into but that wasn't next to that. So I've even drawn a map, so I have a map of my village, which isn't in the books, but it's just for my reference, so I don't forget that the chemist was next to the butcher's at some point. People remember these things. It's quite odd.
Can I just pop back? I find that as the book's gone, I keep inventing new villages when I run out of ideas for an old one, and that's great too, because fiction is what you make up, isn't it? So it's a good place to start an invented village, I think.
Absolutely, yes. You can do it. I've got several hamlets around Wyncombe, which is the village I've invented, and little hamlets that are around. I don't know how familiar any of you are in Sussex, but it's pretty much a black hole. You've got Crawley at the top and Brighton at the bottom, and a lot of little villages in between. It's the whole county is made up of these small hamlets and stops, so you can pretty much invent a way to your heart's content, and nobody's going to know, because that's what it's like.
So what are the problems with writing them in a village? Do you worry that you'll encounter like the Midsummer Murders effect of like having a murder rate of New York, for instance, in a tiny village? And how do you deal with that? Does it make you more inventive?
I think it probably does. You have to invent a way for your detective or sleuth, in my case, to be involved with it. Otherwise, as you say, you get the Miss Marple effect. Wherever Miss Marple is, somebody's going to die. So you have to be very wary of that. And sometimes in book 2, the murder is sort of slightly removed from the village. So sometimes it's not necessarily about the village so much as the village people, the people that live there, even though they're somewhere else. They're not dressed as Red Indians. Village people. Sorry. Bad puns. Bad habit.
Great pun.
Go on, Chris.
My biggest thing, I think, is that because it's quite a small town, the police, the two sort of detectives in mine are two like 25-year-old boys at the start, who sort of know all they know from watching Sherlock on TV and having sort of an encyclopedic knowledge. The thing that the police should be able to solve the crimes that they come up against, but it's having to find a way that the police either aren't interested or write it off as a very simple conclusion. And I think that's the thing. 6 books in, I think in the 4th book, the police were sent for competency training, as a sort of way of having the reader be like, surely after 4 they know what they're doing. So yeah, I think the detective inspector is coming up to some sort of review meeting, surely. So yeah, I think that's my biggest thing: how to make it feel like the police are interested but still don't know what they're doing, and that's a challenge, I think.
Can I answer it slightly differently, Kaz? In one of the books, I think it's January Killing, I think, I actually used my own village briefly in it, and I wish I hadn't, because I think I described it as on a Saturday afternoon when all the shops are closed, something like you could imagine tumbleweed rolling down the hill and Miss Marple walking up it in a tweed suit, and it offended a few people. And the other problem is that as a result of using my own village once, I still get people coming up to me in the street saying, in chapter 3, that character with the thing, that's Harry from the pub, isn't it? With the balding head and the boil on his neck. I don't know who the heck they're talking about. I've never come across anybody called Harry. Imagine that's what's going on.
Yes, so, fictional village are much safer.
Yeah.
Well, my maiden character is kind of, her father owns the village essentially, so she's got carte blanche to practically walk into anybody's lives because she's from that era. So I solved that with it. She knows everybody, or they all know her. It's more precise, so it gets over a lot of that. She has no accent city.
Sam has asked you what you think needs to happen for a book to stay true to being a village crime. Do you think it needs to be cozy, or can you go a bit further with the details of the murder? Can it be quite... How grim would you go, maybe, is the question.
Well, you can get quite grim, I think, can't you? It's I've got quite a body count in mine. It's usually 4 or 5 by the end of the book, you know.
Yeah, they used to say, didn't they, that the trouble with the Inspector Morse books and TV series was that it was gradually depopulating Oxford. But villages have got fewer people. I think you can do cosy or non-cosy in a village. I think that's the nice thing about them. They're kind of, unlike mass urban environments, they're concise and there's a tension there potentially. You know, people have got a lot more to lose, a lot more visible when things go wrong in the village,
Reputation,
whether it's cozy or not.
Yes. You have to keep a very long. I keep very detailed lists of characters that appear in each book so that they can reprise now and again. They kind of walk in and out of the various books. Because in a small village, the same people will walk in and out. You know, the chemist is going to be the same. The school teacher is going to be the same. The doctor, they're all going to be the same characters, even though they only have walk-on parts. They've essentially got to be the same person. That's something you've got to be very careful of, because people do then write and say, "Excuse me, wasn't that character named X or Y?" And think, yeah. You've got to be careful.
What about you, Chris? What do you think makes a good village crime? What makes it stay true?
Well, I agree with the other two. Mine are very much marketed as cozy crimes, so all the sort of killing and bloodshed has to be off screen, which I kind of counteracted by the main character feeling woozy when he sees blood. Some scenes are reported by his friend in a very non-making his friend woozy way, so it's very sanitized, which I think works because I'm not a massive fan of blood. So when I was researching the police ones and some of the stuff, I horrific. So this is a much kinder way of describing crime scenes, or not. Generally, because they're pretty short, there is only one crime, be that theft or a body or anything like that. So my body count is quite short, or low. So Stonebridge is in no trouble of running out of butchers or beggars.
They're usually, my bodies usually come in from the outside. They're not usually local people, so you get over that by the sort of stranger effect.
Yeah.
Which makes more sense, I think, in a village setting. As you say, otherwise you won't have many villagers left by the end of the series.
Would you reach a point, though, where people aren't going to want to visit the village? Because of the news articles coming out.
No. The advantage of writing about, in my case, rural villages is that they are beautiful places by and large. And in your descriptions or your references, you can make it be what it is, which is a really nice place to be, except today because it's raining. But the whole point of that beauty is that you can disrupt it by crime, which has to be solved and has to find a resolution, which is what the real wants, I think.
The advantage of World War II in Sussex is a very, very mobile population at that time. People coming in, going out, evacuations and refugees. So you got a constant stream of people going in and out. So I've kind of solved that by people moving around an awful lot. Then you got troops coming in, Canadians, Americans, whatever. So it's always got this constant drift of population. So it's more golden age and cozy, really.
Also, people are quite fascinated by crime, aren't they? So I reckon it's quite a nice way to get tourists in. Sometimes if people come to sort of say like, "Oh, it's the spot where this happened" or whatever. So yeah, I think there's a market for that almost.
Well, I mean, you see Morse tours, don't you, where people actually go around with various places where crimes are supposed to have taken place in Oxford. So yeah, I think people do have a fascination for that sort of thing. Yeah. Or the Ripper tours in London, I mean, people are ghoulish.
Down the road from me, the Broadchurch tours, when Broadchurch came on TV, West Bay and all those areas. Yeah. It's only about 15, 20 miles away from here. Rather put me off.
What's the reception been like to yours? Sort of, I mean, most of you don't sort of live where they're written, really, do you? So, what do you find the reception's been like to your kind of village crimes?
Oh, that's a good question. Somebody else answer that. We'll have a think.
I haven't really had a problem because of this. It's because of the time scale. You know, if you're set in 1940, it's not the same as if it was set in 2020. You know, you've got 60 years difference. So I think it makes it almost the past is another country. So you have that. I don't have that problem really.
Well, I mean, I think I deliberately used that difference. So, you know, the Yorkshire detective, when he moves down here, they all make funny comments about his accent, and they talk like yokels. So there's a double irony going on there. So I think I managed to kind of set one against the other a little bit in a sort of dark humour way at times, but also I do quite like irony in literature. So it's handy to have that one to use. Yeah,
makes sense.
I think the reaction to mine, I'd written 3 in a police series, and I think people had quite enjoyed that character, the main character in that series. So when I said I was going to do something else, it was a little bit of, we'd kind of like more of that, because the 3 books came out within, I think, 14 months of each other. So it was quite an intense 3-book series, and I kind of thought I'd quite like to do something else, especially in lockdown, where I find writing darkness or like very gritty and bloody and gory things like that. I wanted to try something else, so I wanted a bit more lighthearted, because that's what I was wanting to read at the time as well. So I think the sort of, not the location particularly, it was more it's another character, another set of characters that we're going to have to learn, and sort of feel like maybe people weren't quite ready for it. But I'm pleased I did, because people very quickly latched on, and it was fun. And I think the thing that drove me away from the police was the research. You know, get the procedure right and going in a very, you know, this has to happen. Whereas this is two lads that are sort of bumbling their way through cases, and it's in a way it's lazy writing, I guess, because you know, it saves me a lot of time doing research.
It's like I've got the Golden Age sleuth, and it's the same. It's the amateur detective, so it's harking back to that Christie feel, or Peter Wimsey, whatever you care to go to with the they might have links to the police, but you can get away with an awful lot more procedurally because they're not police. So
it's funny you should both say that, because at the end of my last book, my detective Zig Batten is basically been hit on the head in the previous book, and he's still having memory lapses and problems, and he gets invalided down to the police force. So the current book I'm writing, in the next 2, he will be finding a new career, and it's not still clear what that's going to be, both for him and indeed for me. So I'm still exploring that a little bit, but that's fun. It's enjoyable, because I take
nice to be outside of it.
I'm sorry.
It's nice to be outside of the police circle, because then you kind of got a little bit more wiggle room, I think.
Well, for me, it's I was trying to pick up Chris's point about the procedure. I mean, like you probably, I've got 400 pages of police manuals on my computer, and I've read it, and you think, well, there's not much of a plot, is there? The characters are appalling. The language is dull. You know, nothing much happens. So to get away from all that and write something a bit more interesting, I think is fun. I think I'm pretty well done with procedurals now.
Do you have an idea where it might go then?
Yes, I do. In the opening scenes, for long, boring, complex reasons, he's built a home office in the garden of his new old house. And he's got a desk in there, and it all starts with a meeting at that desk. So, yeah, I'm not going to say any more than that, partly because I don't know all of it yet. But, yeah, that's where it's going, I think.
Good.
You've got some hellos. We've got Daniel McBreakneck has said hello. Nikki Copleston has. Laura Hamilton, TG, Patsy, Donna Morfitt. My dad has said hello.
Yeah.
he kind of is duty bound to watch because I'm like sat in their house at the moment doing the panel. Donna said, have you ever found yourself going too dark when writing and have to dial it back?
No.
Is there a too dark?
I think for cozy crime there is too dark, and I think I've managed, because I'd written like 5 of them in a row and kept it light, and then I found myself sort of after 5 wanting to try something else again. So I wrote like a PI novel set in America, and that was very dark. And I'm still sort of going over it. And then I went back to write the 6th, and I found myself sort of almost purged of the need to go a bit dark again. So it was easy to get into the cozy. But I think it was important to get away and write something a bit different after 5 quite intense short stories or novellas. Yeah, but I've managed to keep it out of the cozies.
I mean, as I say, I do have a body count with mine, but I do tend, as you were saying about not portraying the bodies too much. I don't dwell on the crime scenes, or I actually very seldom show the crime itself. Mostly there isn't any real need, I don't think, because it's the aftermath that's important.
Yeah,
and that the actual trail, finding the perpetrator of the crime. So showing who it is and how they did it is more why and when and who that matters to me in crime.
Yeah, I think I pretty well agree with all that, really. In this one, An Easter Killing, it's pretty well there's a tradition in this area. I mean, one of the nice things about village crime is villages do retain lots of old traditions, and you can use them, like the cider industry down here and the orchards, wassails and things like that. But there's a local tradition happens every Easter in a village not too far from here. They erect 3 crucifixes on the top of a big hill, and I think they go up there and do a bit of worship on over Easter. And I thought, what would happen if? So that's fairly dark, that one. And I think this one, A January Killing, there's a fairly dark shooting in an orchard at a wassail in the pitch black cold night of January. But apart from that, as you both were saying, I don't tend to write the gory detail, really. And if I do, I think there's always a contrast with a sort of dark humour, which lifts it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I think probably the gallows humour that you get with people involved in that sort of thing, you can portray that darkness through them.
Yeah.
Yes. Their reactions to it.
Yeah. And they're sort of disassociating themselves from it a little by humour or through humour.
Yeah, I think that's massively important. There's a brilliant author, Neil Lancaster, who was a policeman for years, and he said it was a coping mechanism almost. You made light of it, but you knew obviously how serious it was. But he called it cop humor, where it is very much just to get you through the night.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah.
So moving away from the village crime for a bit, what have you enjoyed reading this year? Give us some book recommendations. I'm asking everyone. It's a great question.
I am obsessed, and I can't believe it's taken me this year to get to them. But the Rivers of London series, and I've had them on my shelf for maybe the first 6 for a couple of years, and I've never got to them. And we interviewed them on our podcast, so I thought I'd best read the first one, and I literally have read them back to back, and I'm on the 6th, and I've got about 30 pages left, and I am like, when your kids are like talking to you, like, yeah.
How can you stop with 30 pages left?
I know. Well, I was sitting with literally, I'm so glued to it. It's here. But yeah, I cannot. And it's my birthday on Wednesday, so I've asked my wife for the next. I think there's 3 more, so I'm hoping she's taken my hints.
There's all the spin-off novellas as well.
Yes, yeah. I found one in a charity shop the other day, a little hardback. I think he's such a great writer. Very, very witty.
Yes, they're good. Did you ever read the Jim Butchers?
No.
Jim Butcher is American, the last, the only wizard detective. And the early ones particularly are very humorous, and they're more supernatural obviously than anything, but they're a lot of fun, the early ones. The later ones became very dark, and he kind of painted himself into a corner, but you know, the first half of the series is very much in that similar vein.
Is it the Dresden Files?
That's the one. Dresden Files.
Brilliant. There we go. I'm all over that. Thank you very much.
Do you feel your to be read pile getting taller and taller?
Oh, yeah.
I've been reading I've read the last two John le Carré's, who died recently. You know, mixed reactions, but very interesting writer. I think some of his techniques are really quite interesting. But I've been disappointed with the very latest Ian Rankin. Really, I struggled to get through it in the end. I can't even remember what it's called, frankly. The one about the body, handcuffed body in a car, dumped in a car somewhere. And
yeah,
I just found it a bit, slow. No.
Yes.
Everybody likes different things, don't they? Jan, what about you? What have you read?
Oh God, I've read so many. I do like Anne Cleeves. I read most of her stuff as it comes out. Ellie Griffiths, because again they go into the crime rather than the gory detail, which I think doesn't interest me, despite the fact that I've written a lot of horror short fiction. The gore doesn't really interest me so much. I want to know who and why is more important to me with crime fiction.
Yeah. So
I just finished a Susan Hill book. I think the last one she wrote about the Simon Seralia, the detective, and that's very much in the vein that you just described, Jan. You know, it's really about people and crime, sort of fabric, really.
Yes. Yeah. And this Kate Atkinson has that crime, and Kate Moss read her stuff. Is that very much involved with the characters. It's all about. That's what I quite like about village fiction and having this portmanteau of various characters that you can build. Each book builds, and you learn a bit more about these characters as you go along. Even though they're walk-on parts, you suddenly get to know, Mrs. Crisp in the village shop and people like that. It's yeah.
But isn't it what you were saying before, that they walk on parts in this book, but in 2 books' time they may be the central character?
Exactly.
It's material, isn't it? Really
built upon them enough to be, a person in their own right, and not just a name.
Yeah.
So I quite enjoy that world building aspect of it. It's fun.
Yeah, I think speaking of characters as well, Mick Herron, his Jackson Lamb series, or I guess Sly House, but I mean, I could read a novel of them just sitting in an office with the humor that they have in it, and I think the series has done really well as well in capturing that. So yeah, I'd love him and his writing.
I'm surprised we're getting the writing done with all this reading.
I know, yeah.
I'm following very much in your footsteps, Chris. I've just finished book 9 in the Rivers of London series.
Was it good?
Very good.
I just read that one too.
Yeah, I've just booked Ben for a chat in the group.
Oh, cool.
So it'll be very exciting, hopefully.
Yeah, he's very, very funny.
Yeah, well worth a look if anybody hasn't tried them.
Yeah, they're very much apart from cozy crime, very much my genre. I love kind of urban fantasy and things. So
the urban fantasy stuff is always fun.
Yeah. It's a good other genre apart from a nice cozy read. While we're on that, let's go with our other group favourite questions. So what have been your most memorable moments as an author so far?
Oh,
Look at everyone sitting back and thinking. Nobody wants to go first.
I suppose every author remembers the first time they handle the first copy of their first book, don't they? I mean, it's like having a baby. Well, being with a baby. I want to reassure you of that. Just holding it in your hand is a great moment, really. You never forget it, even if the book's not that good. My first one wasn't. I've rewritten it 4 times. It's in the 4th edition now, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Why? Was that based on like reader feedback, or was that just you wanting to get it right? I guess.
Oh, a bit of both, I think, and also on personal stubbornness, I think, too.
Yeah.
And that had something to do with it, both in creating the problems and in solving them.
Yeah.
I see it as a journey, really. The whole writing thing. I don't think it's safe to sort of second guess your reader. I think you just write because it's a journey, and my journey in my case, and that's what keeps me going. I like it.
Readers are important. I had an interesting thing happen to me recently. That you see the pictures of the Queen with the fell ponies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bunch's pony is a fell pony. And so somebody actually emailed me and said, I didn't know fell ponies existed till they'd read Bunch's books. And then there's the Queen with 2 fell ponies. It's
a great photograph, that, wasn't it?
Yeah, except her in white.
You must have taken the Queen all morning to groom them that well, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. All those the fetlocks, all of the hair and it takes some doing. They got hellish manes, those things. It's tough as old boots too. It's trying to carry comb those. Sorry. Worked with horses when I first left school. So.
I think my biggest thing, I love book covers. So one of the main reasons I wanted to finish my book when I first started writing was to see, whichever publisher, if I was lucky enough to get one, wanted it, what they do with it. And I was very lucky that I've signed with Red Dog Press, who are an indie publisher, and they're based near me now. He lives about 10 minutes away, and we've become good friends. But the covers that he puts out, not just for me, but for the rest of his authors as well, I think he's doing some of the best stuff at the minute. And everything he's done for me, I've really, really loved. So I think that's my favorite part. Every time I send it off, knowing that something special is going to come and I'm going to be really blown away. I say it every time he sends one, I think it's the best one yet. And it always feels like it is.
Covers matter though, don't they? And the generic covers are kind of yeah.
Yes. How many more covers with a back view of a girl in a red dress do we want to see?
You've got this thing where you go into the bookshop and you see this, and it's just another cover of somebody walking away, and you think, have I read that one? And you can't tell from the cover because they are completely interchangeable. So unless you actually keep a list on your phone or something, you got no idea if you read it or not, or I don't anyway, because I got memory like a sieve. The titles don't always stay with me, so I rely on the visual clue. That, oh yeah.
I do think a good cover can really sell a book. Sama said that she saw Chris live at an event this week, which she's still talking about. She said you were brilliant.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
And she's really enjoyed. I think she's just planning to go to all of the future ones. And she said, are all of you planning on attending or taking part in any upcoming events?
I'm at the Staffordshire Lit Fest in a couple of weeks, and at Chillicon later in the month too. But that's with my horror hat on. So. I've done more horror events than I have crime events, I must admit. So.
I'm sort of vaguely reluctant because I always enjoy the events, and I like this one, but I don't enjoy the prelude to the event, really. I find it sometimes quite unnerving, really. I suppose that's why I write books rather than sing songs on stage or something like that.
Yeah.
You can do it in the privacy of your own home.
Yeah. I was both of the time. So Rob Parker, who's another wonderful author, has set up a monthly event in Manchester Central Library, which is a beautiful building. And he sort of did a trial one last month, and he had some brilliant authors, Joseph Knox and others. And it was supposed to be S.J. Watson and a few others the next day. And S.J. couldn't make it. And it was about something that I can't remember what it was about, but I got asked as a sort of stand-in. So I was going in anyway, so I just sort of got on the train, got the text saying, "Oh, would you mind standing in?" So I said, "Yeah, no worries." Went, did it, and it was my first ever thing that I'd done live as an author, and I absolutely loved it.
Mhm.
And then on last week, the one that Sam's mentioning, again, I was going as just going to watch it, and Jonathan Whitelaw, who's another great cozy writer, his latest book, The Bingo Hall Detectives, is fantastic. But I've been talking to him online for about a year and a half, and I was really looking forward to meeting him. And he got stuck on the motorway in horrible traffic. So I got a text again saying, "It's about cozies. Would you mind just stepping in?"
Not
So
the
I'm very, yeah. I mean, I'm benefiting from from other people's, but it's been great, and that's going to be a monthly thing. And the lineups that he's got coming up are just fantastic. So it's cool when there's an appetite in a city that has sort of gone unquenched in a way, because the room was buzzing, and people were they had questions, and it was great, and I hope it continues for a long time.
I miss
I'm
that
just,
from Birmingham.
I'm just concocting in my head a plot whereby an author, a crime author, gets really, really famous by sabotaging the transport. Lots of other authors who are supposed to go to the events he gets famous at. But you've already done it, Chris.
Yeah, I've lived it, yeah.
So you've not got any other events planned, Chris?
No, not unless no one can turn up next month, and then I'll sail on in there. But yeah,
I think he's established that he doesn't need to plan any of them.
Just rock up
with a pen knife. Is anyone going to Harrogate? It's always a good question, isn't it? I've just booked my tickets to.
Yes.
No. Not
Are you going for the whole
I'm
time?
Yorkshire, but I'm not going. In Yorkshire, in Leeds anyway, parts of Leeds, they don't call it Harrogate, they call it arrogant. I'll tell you that.
I'm going to Scarborough for the Chillicon, so I can't, rather than Harrogate for the crime. So
yeah. Are you going the whole time, Kaz?
I'm going for the Saturday.
Yeah, me too. Staying over?
No, because I live really close. I live in Leeds. So,
fair play.
And I don't think I'll be broken up probably until like the Friday.
Yeah, and then because we're in stock, we've got like 2 weeks holiday at Whit, so we don't finish until like the 29th of July or something. So I've got school on the Monday.
The hazards of being a teacher.
I know, it sucks, doesn't
it? Retirement's a wonderful thing.
I was just about to say that. Yeah. Do what you like when you like.
So one of Sam's favourite questions, since she asked us a nice one about events, is tell us about the most recent scene that you wrote without giving away a spoiler.
Oh,
blimey. Right.
How are you doing?
My latest one. So I've started writing Stonebridge 7, and my main character, as well as being an amateur sleuth, is sort of like a landscape gardener. So he turns up. There's a big film set going on in Stonebridge, a big fancy house, and he's been asked to go and trim the bushes and mow the grass and stuff like that. But one of the helpers or the workers at the thing have got they mistake him for one of the workers, so they go and ask him, can they just get the star, like, knock on his caravan and get him to come out? And he tries to explain that he's not anything to do with it, but they've already rushed off. And when he goes, there's a body, and they discover that the star of the film has been killed, one could imagine. And so he's sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time again, and that is how Stonebridge 7 starts off.
I'm just trying to find a photograph to show you. Yeah, here we go. I took this photograph on the harbour side in Malaga in Spain fairly recently, and I wasn't looking for a plot or an introduction, but I thought, and there was a guy, the guy whose head it was I thought kind of touting for trade for the catamarans that take tourists around the bay, enticing kids and parents aboard with his head on. And he'd taken it off because it was a very hot day and put it by the side of the quay. So the scene I've just written, which is near the opening of the next book, is my detective watching this chap at work, then taking his head off, and then looking at the mugshot in the detective's hand and going, "Oh yeah, that's him." And that's who he's been looking for. So he's always revealed, and that's how it begins. Really.
Brilliant.
But that just was pure chance, really.
Book 5 that I'm just putting the final touches to at the moment. The Deadly Plot is about a prisoner of war, Italian prisoner of war turning up buried in the Victory Gardens. As and so this is about people not from the village, so but involves village people, so it's village characters. And then the chap that they suspected of killing him then turns up dead, and it's all to do with organised crime from both Italy and America that have rocked up into Winkham. So it's kind of quite complex from that point of view, but yeah.
That's a nice thing about village crime too, isn't it? That there's an assumption in many places that villages are innocent. You know, they're the old idols of England and so on, but they're just as capable of housing the kind of crime that you've just described as anywhere else.
Yeah.
Someone's just asked me if my parents' puppy is there, and he is. Hanging out. She said, "Do any of you fancy writing?" He just opened a new tab on my computer. She says, "Do any of you fancy writing about a puppy full of mischief? It'll be a fan favourite."
I bet it would be.
Well, it's a fairly standard part of cosy crime, isn't it? The cat or the dog or something, or the horse or something of that nature. So why not?
Bunch has Perry the fell pony, but she's also got a insane spaniel that was bequeathed by somebody, and it's supposed to be a gun dog, and it's about as much use as a chocolate frog. You know,
I've got a character in the first book, a villain, and they can't really touch him for a while, but they get him initially because in a fit of anger, he hits a horse with a whip, and the sergeant, who's a local Somerset guy, whips his hands behind his back and shoves handcuffs on them and arrests him for malicious maltreatment of a horse under the Animal Rights Act, which apparently does exist. And it goes on from there. So little things can lead to big things, can't
they? Yeah. Yes.
Laura said she thought the rule for mascots was you couldn't be seen without your head.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Kaz.
Laura has said that she thought the rule for mascots was that you couldn't be seen without your head.
I don't think he was a mascot in the sense of true Disney. He was just basically trying to make money. I think that's what he was, really. I think he was leaving a hat around as well. So a lot of tourists around that day.
So what is your next release that's coming out for all of you? What book's coming out next?
I'm not sure at the minute. I've started writing a podcast, a history podcast, and that has taken a lot of my time at the minute. So the writing has sort of gone by the wayside the last couple of weeks. So at the minute, I'm not sure. I'm sort of having a chat with my publisher about. I've had an idea for a sort of different police book that I'd written last summer about, and I got about 20,000 words in. And then I had to write the sort of stone bridges that I was contracted for. And now that I've got the 6 and this other idea started clawing at me again. So I had a chat with him the other day and said, because I'd signed for 6 more stone bridges. But I thought actually this idea, when you get it and you try to do other stuff, but this one's sort of like you've got it in your head and it's got you. So I sort of said, we did agree that we'd do more cozies, but actually I've got this. And he said, yeah, write that one. So I think that's what I might work on when I get a bit of time.
Well, hopefully the one that should have come out last year, The Case of Murder, will be out later this year. So which is book 4 of the Bunch Courtneys. But I'm also just started work on another World War II crime series, which involves a wren, but that's still in the planning stage. A dispatch riding wren, because they were actually the Admiralty employed or had an entire legion of female dispatch riders. In fact, by 1940, all of their dispatch riders were women, were wrens. But that gives them a chance to go all over the country, because not hammered to one place as you are in Village Crime.
It's really cool.
My next one's called A Secret Killing that I'm writing at the moment, and parts of it are so secret I don't even know what they are. But and it's village. It's set in a Somerset village again, a Somerset small town. But it also, like most of the other books, it goes abroad. It goes to Spain this time. Usually, my detective has a friend, a police friend in Greece and Crete, so those come up. And at the same time, like Chris, I'm outlining the book that follows, which I think is, because I write about village traditions a lot, it's going to be about Morris dancing, this one. And I've been having some interesting times because I've been doing sort of research with friends and in the pub, saying things like, questions like, why would somebody want to kill a Morris dancer? And the kind of answers you can imagine for yourself. But we'll wait and see.
Terry Pratchett has a really good scene with the dark Morris. Terry Pratchett has a really good set of dark Morris dances in some of his books that are worth looking at.
But Morris rather than.
You've been asked if your series can be read as standalones, and if not, if someone's new to you, what is the best book to start with?
Good question.
To whom?
To all of you.
Yeah, well, I think all of mine could be read as standalones, because you tried to explain who people are as they come in, even if they were in previous books. I think it's very dangerous to assume that a reader has read whatever's gone before. You've got to put in some, so they need to be able to be read on their own, and hopefully they'll then go back and read the rest. That's the general object of the exercise.
What's book one of them though, Jan, if people want to start in order?
Winter Downs is book 1. In Her Defence is book 2. And Listed Dead is the 3rd one. And as I say, Case for Murder will be book 4, and Deadly Plot will be book 5. So there's 2 more to come.
Chris, do you want to tell us about yours next?
Yeah, mine can be read as standalones. However, at the start, in the very first book, so it's going to be small, but the Curious Dispatch of Daniel Costello, the green one, the 2 main characters, Adam and Colin. Adam is like lying on his mum's couch, with no idea what he wants to do with his life, and he's quite content in that. So he's sort of wasting away, his days. The other one, it works in a retirement home, and he's got a bit more of a bit more of what he wants to do with himself, and he enjoys his job and things like that. And they very much grow as 25-year-olds do. They get more mature and life happens. You can dip in at any stage because the mysteries can be read standalone, but I think to get a true sense of the characters, which I think is one of the most important things about village mysteries, almost you come back for the characters, and you know that probably the mystery is going to be pretty good. But I know the books that I really love and the series that I love, it's the character, and I might not remember much about book 3 what the thing with the mystery was, but I remember, well, that character did this or this happened and it led on to this. So I think for the character development, it's probably best to start at the start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
mine is much the same. You can read them standalone because, as Jan said, you try and keep the reader up to date, the new reader up to date. And I don't think it's a question of, if you read it as a series, it's a better experience than if you read standalone. I think it's just a different experience, that's all.
Yeah.
So either, really. But if you wanted to start with one, you probably start with The Killing Tree, because that introduces the detective for the first time. And it's the first case when he moves down from the north to the south. So that's quite significant. He moves from urban to village and rural. So that's useful to start with, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's similar, because in Winter Downs, it's the first case that Bunch is involved with, because it's a friend of hers that's killed. So that's how she's drawn into it. And then she goes on from there with subsequent cases. So yes, you're right. If starting at the beginning is, with any series, is usually best, because the characters develop. I mean, these also, it's a historical fact, because I started in late 1939, and as you go, you see these various historical events as a backdrop to all that's going on. Sometimes it's relevant to what the crime is. So yes, you can use, the great thing about historical fiction is you can use history as a plot device almost. It's quite handy.
Yeah.
So, which of your characters would you most like to take out for dinner, and why?
Great question.
I think I've killed the ones.
I don't know.
There's a character of mine that it's sort of like what you've both talked about already, where it's a sort of a character that doesn't appear too much, but when he does, he's like one of my favorite to write. And it's an elderly gentleman who lives in the retirement home that Colin works in, and he sort of gets all the best lines. And when they're not up for investigating, he's sort of pushing them or reading the newspapers to see if there's something suspicious going on. And his name is Barry. And I think if I was to take anyone out, he'd be a good night out.
Sounds it.
I've got a similar character in mind. Is an old country boy, old gent who's a bit of a poacher, is a bit of a and I like writing about him. He doesn't contribute that much, but he's always got, it's always a bit of fun.
Yeah.
It seems we've all got an old codger in our books. I've got one called Norm Hogg, which somebody says, one character says, it sounds a bit like a smoker's cough. And I don't think I'd like to take him out for dinner. It would be a cider evening, I think, with him. Yeah. But he is a character, yeah. And I probably will use him again. Yeah. Definitely.
Good answers. So we've got about 8 minutes left of our chat. Give us your craziest review you've ever had.
What review? Which?
Yeah, your craziest review you've ever had.
Oh.
Someone called my first book, not in this series, in my sort of police procedural, where it opens with it's set in the opening scene's in an ice rink, and I had a vision of sort of there being a lot of blood and it being quite a nice visual, I guess. I sort of pictured the camera rising up and the sort of spread of blood against the white. There's a lot of it's quite gory and stuff like that. And someone called it twee, which I really didn't get. And to be like, I'm fine with negative reviews as long as they tell me what it is. But they literally said that, and then another one was just the 1 star and no review, which is more annoying than anything, because surely I'd like to learn, and it being your first book or 10th book or whatever, if there's something that people think, actually, if the author knew this, it might improve it, I'm all for that. But just the hit and runs are the annoying ones.
Mm-hmm.
Hit and runs, yeah.
You never know whether one.
Sorry, go on, Jan.
You never know whether one of the stars because it didn't turn up the next day. Or
yeah,
it could be something that simple, couldn't it?
A friend of mine had a 1-word review, and the word was meh. In The Simpsons, meh. Yeah. I had a really constructive review, though it was brutal in its brevity. On the first book, before I re-edited and rewrote it, it was 7 words. It said, too long, too complicated, too many characters. And it was all true, all correct. But he could have been a little bit more refined.
Yes. I suppose the comment I had on one of my horror stories was similar, that it was too twee. They didn't say twee. I think they said too passive. There is an element of readers who like to be knee deep in viscera.
Yeah.
And you're never going to please them unless you've got a blood and guts spewing out on every third page. So you know there are some people you're never going to please. So
Yeah. What a great phrase that is, knee deep in viscera. Sounds like a heavy metal band.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to all three of you. Finish us off with a reminder of yourselves and your books. And if people can buy signed copies from you or from somewhere else, tell us about that as well.
They can buy signed copies from me if they drop me a line, yes, or from the usual outlets online or in stores or whatever. But that's the series. Easy enough to find. The first 3 that are out now, and there's, I say, 2 more to come. So yeah, buy, please.
Mine can be found on again, like all the usual places, but Red Dog Press, who are my publishers, are an indie, and times are tough. I get that, and it's tough for indies. There's indies folding all over the show, and Sean, who's in charge of it, has worked really hard to get it going. And their books are great. The authors they choose, they can't be, they don't have a massive list, because they simply can't cater to everyone. But the authors that they choose are consistently good. I mean, the different genres, they've got cozy, they've got real gritty, transgressive stuff. So all my books can be bought from there, signed, but there are lots of amazing other authors there too that are well worth your time.
You can find mine on Amazon or worldwide. Oh, that sounds so good, doesn't it? Worldwide. I'll say it again, worldwide. But I'm happy you can contact me on my Facebook page and so on, and through the Amazon author page, and I'm happy to send people a signed copy. Yeah, no problem.
Yep. Marvellous. And all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
The start of your Sunday for us.
Thank you. Thanks to you, Cass. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
There's a lot of people saying that adding to their growing TBR mountain, which is always a good thing, isn't it, at the end of the chat?
Oh dear.
Thank you.
Well, I've just looked at the scores, and Everton are winning at the moment.